All right, welcome everybody. I'm at Cruz. This is the last lesson, continuation of different topics today. This is episode number 47, Go with the Flow. I've talked about this concept before, and the one thing I want to reiterate here is I've done tons of videos. If I ever overlap, double talk and stuff like that, it's because I'm not keeping track of what this stuff is. I'm trying my best to, but if I talk over a subject, maybe there's an added subject I talked about before, maybe more things will be added, maybe I strengthen the concept of something I talked about before. But regardless of that fact, just so you know. So the idea of going with the force, common thing also, is if we look at everything as a balance, yin, yang, positive, negative, active and passive and stuff like that. Going with the force is great to say, but going with the force is only partial of it. If you simply just go with the force, you're only doing half of the equation. And a lot of times people get caught up in that concept of just going with the force, and they're like, I went with the force, it didn't work, right? So there's other components that need to occur when you're doing it. So let me stress the two factors that are sometimes missing when you go with the force. One, going with the force, yes, you go with the force, but you gotta remember, go with the force and get back to the target. Like for example, if my hand gets pushed out here, going with the force is one thing, right? See, my hand's here and I'm not fighting against it, but if he pushes my hand here, I can't just keep going with the force. I need to be able to flow with that force to the target. So going with the force is, okay, that's half the component. Going with the force to the target is the second half. It is another part. You have to have that in place. So that's a necessity that has to occur. If you can simply go with the force to the target, you're already halfway there, okay? Now, the other component that needs to occur with is being passive to active. Going with the force is simply a passive state. That means he's moving me, I'm not fighting it, I'm not resisting it, but at some point, you can't constantly go with the force. A lot of times people say, well, all of a sudden, I got ops out and I went with the force and I felt off balance. True, that can happen, right? Why? Because if you get pulled, right? For example, I'm here, I get pulled, I'm going with the force, I'm going with the force. One component only. I have to go with the force, which is what you're doing, but I have to go with the force and then control that afterwards, right? In other words, if the dog's pulling you, right? The dog's pulling you, right? You go with it so the dog doesn't pull you. Okay, so for example, if I'm here, let me give you an example. I'm here, the dog's pulling me, I go with it. But the dog's still in charge and he's pulling it, so that's no good. So if the dog's pulling me, great. I go with it, and now I'm in charge and the dog is following me. So the two components that I'm stressing that most people fail to do as far as going with the force is what? Flow to the target, that's one. And two, you got to take over the control. You got to go from passive to active off that. So a lot of times people are like, oh, I went with the force. Yes, you went with the force. Did you control the force afterwards? No. Okay, well that's a problem. You have not created the balance within yourself, right? What have I always said over and over again? That it is your responsibility to create balance within yourself. If you do not create that balance for you, don't worry. Someone or life will create that balance for you instead. And in that case, you're gonna have to be reactionary to that situation. But if you can create the balance for yourself, when that occurs, you automatically can adjust to that particular concept or that particular force that comes in. All right, so simply stated, right? I keep saying this over and over again, but sometimes you gotta hear that lesson. If you look at single stick, right? I'm palm here. So here I'm in tanzao, and then I palm. Here I'm in futsal and I jet, right? So let's look at it from two perspectives. In this position, when the tanzao moves, he moves first, so I'm passive, right? So he winds up, I'm passive. So I have to follow him and go with the flow of that. If I simply keep going with the flow, I'm gonna get hit eventually. So here, I follow, I listen, I go with the flow, and then once I have the feel and match that initial force, then I take over and control it. Right, and then vice versa. Here I'm active, leading off the palm, and then I have the palm, and then now all of a sudden he takes over my motion. I can't fight that. I have to go with the flow also, and then go from an active position of control to a passive position of control. Okay, so there's a constant balance that you're learning. In the end, something as simple a single stick is not about me palming you or you blocking my palm. That concept of actually creating that balance is what you're looking to develop, okay? So just remember, go with the flow, small component, half. The other part is you gotta flow to the target and take over and control. All right, keep that in mind.